the climate change scare campaign. It is in full mode at the moment. You notice the timing? It is no coincidence. Doomsayers are now predicting a climate catastrophe in Australia if we don't act now. And it's across newspapers nationwide. At the heart of the claims is that 1 in 100-year events could become annual by 2100. 2100. And sea levels will rise higher than first thought. Professor Garnaut, the economist, claims that scientists might have underestimated the rises in sea levels, and I think that is a startling omission, clearly. Because Professor Garnaut has effectively told the nation's media that despite all the science, despite all the money thrown into climate change, billions of dollars worth, no one knows what, if any, the effects will be. Do you notice how specific they've become? It's about as general as you can possibly get. Climate change has been a religion for a quarter of a century. In its earlier guise, we were told it was, there'd be no plant life left because of acid rain. Then we were told we're plunging the world into an ice age. Then it was global warming. Then climate change, and now catastrophic weather. Now Garnaut is pushing for the carbon dioxide tax. He wants to see it sooner rather than later. But at the end of the day, even he cannot honestly tell us what the effects of climate change will be, despite the billions. And interestingly, he's now claiming science is collated and might be more accurate than internationally published peer-reviewed literature. It's a big call. Some say it might be a desperate grab of headlines to turn the climate change debate around in favour of the government. Who knows? He does work for government. I don't know whether that's true or not. Queensland recently saw flooding in Brisbane. But rather than it being a climate change event, the evidence suggests it's just part of a natural cycle. There were larger floods in the 19th century. And the same with cyclones. Same with bushfires. Hot summers, cold winters. You talk to any cocky about the numbers of droughts as opposed to floods that they get. It is cyclical. It is Australia. Henry Kendall, Dorothy McKellar, Banjo Patterson were just a few well-known writers who've written about this for the past 200 years. The predicted catastrophes are just not happening. In fact, Julia Gillard didn't mention climate change once in her presentation to Congress. And yet, her favourite bloke, Ross Garnaut, said, we will force America to act if we go ahead with a carbon dioxide tax. Well, she missed her opportunity big time. I want to catch up with Ian Plimer. He's a scientist who's taken a close look at climate change. He's a professor of mining geology at the University of Adelaide, and he joins me on the line right now. Ian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chris, and please make this a long interview. I'm trapped in the cellar of Chess's restaurant in Adelaide, so keep the interview going for 5 minutes.
You are incorrigible. Now listen, how all of us...
I can tell you that.
Yeah, now listen, how all of a sudden, despite the fact that there have been billions thrown at the sciences to investigate so-called global warming or climate change, that all of a sudden they've got it all wrong, and now it will be disasters one every year, not one every 100 years from next century.
Well, there is absolutely no science published at all that's saying that we're going to go from 1 in 100-year events to annual events. Someone has made that up, and that in common language is called fraud, and that's what we're getting fed. The second thing is there's not one scientific publication that proves that human emissions of carbon dioxide give us catastrophic climate change. The human carbon dioxide we emit is just one molecule in 85,000 in the air. Why pick on the innocent? And Garnaut's been going on about Sydney Harbour. He should actually get out of that sheltered workshop called Canberra and go for a walk along the beaches. The reason why there are rock platforms along the beaches at Sydney is that sea level was 1.5 metres higher only 5,000 years ago. What's been happening in Sydney is sea level's been going down because the land goes up and down and sea level goes up and down.
Just before you leave that, tell me a little bit about erosion. I know that people say, oh, look at how that headland has changed in the time that I have been living here for the past 30 years. You can see that there's obviously climate change going on. I don't think people take into account what erosion can do to sandstone.
Well, quite. And the second thing is, if the land is lifting up, then you get an increased rate of erosion. And much of the erosion in eastern Australia is because the Great Dividing Range is still moving up. And it's still moving up because we're pushing New Zealand away from us, which is good news, really, to hear. And so that erosion is, in many cases, a natural process. What Garnaut is asking us to do is to forget history, forget archaeology, forget geology, and allow him to put his hand in our trouser pocket, open up the wallet, and take out even more money, despite the fact that they've already pushed up the fuel prices, food prices, and electricity prices.
Why do you think Julia Gillard, Prime Minister, did not use the opportunity to press home her policy for a carbon dioxide tax when she spoke to Congress, when her favourite bloke, Ross Garnaut, has been saying we have to make America follow us? This was the perfect opportunity, yeah?
Yeah, well, we've got to make China follow us also and make India follow us also.
Oh, that's right.
And she's not going to be that stupid in the international arena. And he's out there as the dog barking for her while she's away. And they want to tax us more. And you've got to have someone to do the cheerleading, and he's the man.
What do you think the timing of this is all about? Look, in the last 4 days we have...
frighten us witless.
Say that again?
The timing is to frighten us witless right now while they're campaigning to tax us more. That's what it's all about.
And the national polls are saying that we don't buy a carbon dioxide tax without at least putting it to the vote.
Well, quite. And I'm very pleased he called it a carbon dioxide tax because it is not carbon. Carbon is black. Carbon dioxide is plant food. Without carbon dioxide, we would die. We breathe in air of about 400 parts per million carbon dioxide, and we breathe out air of 4,000 parts per million carbon dioxide. It is not a poison. It is plant food.
Ian, stay there for...
The pollutant is actually misleading and deceptive.
Ian, stay there for a second. There are a couple of people who want to make scientific kinds of comments with your arguments, and I just would like you on air when they went to air. Max, go ahead. Ian is listening.
I've just got this question. Gillard said that we pollute more per head than anyone else. Then why are we measuring it per head? Why aren't we measuring it per area, like square metre or square kilometre? Because that way you would see that China and India are polluting.
We're well down the list, Ian Plimer, aren't we?
Well, Max, you are quite correct. Per individual in Australia, we pump out more plant food into the air than any other nation. The reason for that is that we have some big aluminium smelters in this country, and the reason for that is we are stable. We do not have revolutions, and we do not destroy billions of dollars worth of investment by revolutions. We just have a government to do it for us.
Yeah. Peter, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi.
Look, I agree with everything you've said, Professor. 2 points I'd like to make, and one is, I've studied meteorology since I was 18. I'm 62. Nothing has changed. Our source region for our weather is the Indian Ocean. Our highs and lows form in the Indian, and they migrate across the continent. They move north and south with the inclination. They create our seasons. The monsoon trough arrives in summer. Nothing has changed. This, as you said earlier, is a criminal fraud perpetrated by the socialist left right across the world, who are trying to destroy the coal industry and other industries, and also burden us with a tax. They're quite happy for us to do it. I'd just like to finish by asking the question: what's the background of Mr. Garnaut? What's his real background? Does anybody know? I mean, he's an economist.
He's certainly not a scientist, Ian, is he?
He's an economist. He's in the business of making predictions which go wrong. In terms of nothing changed, nothing has changed for 10,500 years. We are in an interglacial, and out of those 10,500 years, 9,099 of those years have been warmer than last year or the last decade. We are in a period of time where we've had warming for 300 years, coming out of what was called the Maunder minimum. Yet we are in very, very benign times. It is during a glaciation that you get rapid fluctuations of temperature, not during this time.
Okay. I've got to leave it there. You better get back to your cellar without a phone stuck in your ear. But thank you very much for your time. And have you been offered some kind of invitation to turn up to this rally in Canberra on March 23?
Yes, I have. I have a higher duty, and that is to lecture to my students. I would love to come. If I can get someone to stand in for me, I will be there.
Maybe you should bring your students with you. We could arrange a bus out of Adelaide.
They're a scruffy mob.
Well, be in touch. Thank you for your time.